Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we try to shine a spotlight on stories about local grassroots soccer here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well, surviving the heat. How about you?
Doing well. The AC is running, so I'm doing very well. Not having a problem with the heat.
First week we've had to run the AC this year, so
yeah. At the moment, you do anything interesting this last week, soccer wise?
Not particularly. I didn't get to the Wave game on I guess it would have been Saturday. I did go to a meetup for the San Diego Spurs group out in Mission Bay, which was fun. Good to see some old faces. Looking forward to the season starting, tomorrow, I guess.
I was going to say, there's a...
Yeah, the
technically you got a match tomorrow, right?
Oh, I know. I'm not used to this whole winning trophies thing. It's new to me. Yeah, I don't know. I think we talked about this last time. I think I was just kind of giving myself like a couple weeks off of like really diving in on football that I care about, just because season's coming back and I'm going to need to ramp that back up, the emotional investment. So it was nice to kind of focus on some other things for a little bit.
That's good. I actually, I finished my book, that States of Play. So I was about 3/4 of the way through the last time we spoke. I finished up the next day, and then I stumbled across, I don't know where I, caught wind of it. I don't know if it was on another podcast or something else, but ESPN has a documentary, one of these celebrity documentaries, right, that we have for soccer, the Running with the Wolves. Have you heard of that?
I have not, actually.
Oh. Sorry, we watched you there for a second as we switched.
No, sorry, yeah. Well, okay, I was going to ask, is it Wolverhampton, but it looks like it's not, so tell me about this. Is it Roma?
No, but it is in Italy. No, this is documentary. This is I just don't know, Kelly Ripa and her husband Mark Consuelos, I think.
Yes.
And frankly, these are people I don't normally follow or their shows. And I just remember Kelly Ripa from, I guess, when she was co-hosting with Regis Philbin on, which I think is basically the same show that they have in New York. But they own, right now, what is a third division team in Italy. And I must have either read it or heard it somewhere. And someone said, it's not that bad. And I don't know, I didn't have much to do. I was skimming through things, and I saw it when I was on ESPN Plus. And so I thought, all right, I'll check it out. And you know what? It wasn't so bad. 4 episodes, they're about an hour long each, and it just documents, I don't want to give anything away, but documents their third season. Apparently, this is, if I remember correctly, their third year with this team. It was in the 5th division, and then they were in the 4th, and this was their first year in the 3rd division. So this is another...
I'm pretty sure the 3rd division is the first fully professional division in Italian football, or at least where you start seeing largely professional clubs. I could be wrong about that. So, it's great to see that, but I could also see how a club with some financial backing might zip right up through those at least semi-amateur levels. I'm fairly certain,
And I would say, it's not like Wrexham. Right? That's probably the standard everybody's comparing things to anymore. And one of the things I like about Wrexham is the rest of the community stuff, the other things they show about the history and the background, in addition to the soccer. So I personally like the context of both. I know that's something that turns a lot of people off. They want something that's more just about the team. And if you do, this is really about the team. It's certainly done from the perspective of the owners and what they have to do, trying to run an Italian team while they're in the US for the most part. But I thought it was done pretty well overall. It was a good, nice, tight series, 4 episodes, and gave a good background of their previous couple of years, and then coming into this third division, and then what happens in the third division with them. And just different, a lot more. I would say, I think one of the criticisms of, say, Rob and Ryan in the Welcome to Wrexham series is I think people take it as it's too Hollywood, like it's too fabricated a little bit, the series. They don't necessarily tell everything in chronological order, but they're telling and shaping a story. This is really chronological, and it's owners who are, I would say, are a bit more hands-on with the running of the club. So it was interesting. I learned a bit about Italian soccer, which is definitely not, I'm certainly not strong in the either current version or historic version of Italian soccer. So I liked it. Overall, I was surprised because I didn't think that the two celebrities that were here would be really enticing to bring me in. But
yeah, I was going to say
I liked it. I'd give it a thumbs up.
I definitely thought about Regis Philbin more recently than I thought about Kelly Ripa. So that was a bit of a blast from the past there when I said that. The club is, I looked it up, is Campobasso FC.
Campobasso, correct.
Based in Campobasso, which is, I don't know, it looks like the north. No, it's kind of central Italy. It's kind of inland of Naples, Napoli.
Yeah, it's kind of makes a triangle between Rome and Naples, and then on the eastern side you have Campobasso.
Yeah, but yeah, I had not heard of that club nor that documentary. I don't actually have Netflix, so that's probably explains that.
ESPN.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said Netflix for some reason. Okay, I will probably check that out then. That's kind of that sounds fun. Yeah, I confirmed as well. Serie C, the third level, is the first fully professional level in Italian football. So their rise has been rapid, but it'll be interesting to see now how do they cope against other clubs with maybe not the same financial backing, but a fully professional setup. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it was good. I would recommend. Short, like I said, 4 episodes, about an hour each. Very tight story, so it was well done. And with that, I mean, I guess we'll move. Just give a little preview of tonight's episode. I guess we don't always do this. I think I need to do a better job with that here in the beginning. So we are going to dive into part 1 of what is going to become our Pro-Rel series. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So tonight will be part 1. We'll also get into some local San Diego news, some cup news, some lower league news. But as we do always in the beginning, let's jump into some, worldwide current events. And Dylan, I have to say, I guess it's kind of twofold, these series of initial stories we have for news items. I feel my heart goes out to Crystal Palace in the sense because they just lost their arbitration, in the Court of Arbitration for Sport on whether they were going to make it in Champions League, right? Actually, not Europa League.
No, in between Europa League and Conference League.
It was Europa League, okay. But then effectively got demoted to the Conference League. And all this stems from multi-club ownership. And I don't want to go into all the details tonight. I mean, this could be a whole other episode on multi-club ownership and the rules and tournaments. But I think as a neutral, you really have to feel sorry for a club that didn't finish very high in the Premier League last year, but made it all the way to the Cup final and won, and really ought to have a spot. And there's all kinds of technicalities and other things, and frankly, to me, some weird decisions as to justifications. But you really have to feel bad for them that they didn't. And it's a name that's going to come up again in just a moment. But John Textor, who I am not a fan of, and who seems to have his fingers in all kinds of teams right now, that was part of the problem where Lyon gets in, I guess, when you look at Lyon instead of Crystal Palace. So what are your thoughts there with Crystal Palace?
Yeah, so I'm kind of torn because I mean, on the one hand, you're right. Like, I feel really bad for the fans. They're getting screwed over by, what ultimately amounts to bureaucracy. And what's worse than that, it's not even like necessary bureaucracy, but rather, in my view, and this is, my I'm not a professional here, but my view is that UEFA enforces these multi-club ownership rules vis-a-vis competing in the same competitions and the rules they have about blind trust and all that as a CYA cover your ass measure for themselves on the legal front. It's not for sporting reasons. They don't give a shit about that. They do this. They check the boxes so that they are not legally liable. That's my view of this whole situation, right? And so with that in mind, it is true that the owners of Crystal Palace didn't do the things they needed to do to be eligible to be in the same competition as Lyon. And I'm not defending that as a rule structure or even its implementation necessarily, but it is objectively true. And I think that there's part of it where also you have to point out that, and I understand that people like John Textor getting involved with a club like Crystal Palace is part of what allows a club like Crystal Palace to stay relevant and competitive in the modern Premier League. But at the same time, I think that you have to be aware as an ownership group what you're getting into bed with here, which is multi-club ownership. And so ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel really bad for the fans, but I don't feel bad for the club necessarily, if that's like a distinction that can be made, because
Sure.
the fans didn't do anything wrong. And I feel bad for the players too, honestly, because they earned this. They didn't do anything wrong. They don't. I mean, they probably met John Textor, but whatever. They don't give a shit about John Textor. He signs their paychecks. That's it. So I feel bad for the players and the fans, but the club did kind of drop the ball on this one, and that's part of what makes it so frustrating. This could have been avoided, and also this brings me back to my original point about the whole CYA measures and why I think that's really all this is. You look at something like the situation of, and I swear to God, this is not just me being a Spurs fan bringing this up, but Angelos Marinakis at Nottingham Forest is clearly involved in the running of that club. But his ownership shares are in a wink, wink, blind trust of Nottingham Forest. And that's why Nottingham Forest don't have this same issue with Olympiacos, another club that Marinakis is involved with, in European competition. Granted, this would be the first time in a long time that they could possibly have that issue. But it didn't come up the same way that Lyon and Palace did, because as much as I dislike him, Angelos Marinakis checked the boxes to allow UEFA to cover themselves on the legal side, right? And so that's why, even though it would be ridiculous to suggest that he's not involved with Nottingham Forest on, like, in terms of decision making, legally UEFA, like, they don't give a shit, because it's not about the sporting merit. It's about making sure they can't be sued for something. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm not defending the system, but I think that Crystal Palace may have tried to bank on the sporting integrity of UEFA, and that was a mistake. They should have checked the boxes. So anyway, long-winded kind of way of explaining what I already said, which is I feel really bad for the fans and the players, but I don't necessarily feel bad for the Steve Parishes of the world, So.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, there's all kinds of issues here. To me, it ultimately gets back to multi-club ownership, which I think is the bigger
Exactly.
fundamental problem, but that's a whole other podcast we could do at a different
Right.
time. I'm going to switch gears and move to the Netherlands, which similar-ish kind of story. Not exactly the same, but I don't know if you saw Vitesse, which is one of the oldest clubs in
Yeah,
the
they like
Netherlands.
folded or lost their pro license, something
They
like that.
lost their professional license. They basically got kicked out. There's been multiple years of investigations, but the short version is Roman Abramovich, from Chelsea, while he was the Chelsea owner, was basically bankrolling this club in secret. And then when he sold Chelsea, he still had his hands in working with the club. And it seems like the final decision to lose their professional license was based more on lying about what was going on and then got caught. And now it sounds like they're looking to get into one of their amateur leagues. So if I remember correctly, the Dutch's top 2 divisions are professional. The next 3 are amateur, even though they do promotion and relegation. And that really just means in the top 2 divisions, there's much stricter requirements in terms of ownership group, stadium, all the things. Same things
Sure.
we hear in this country, right? So they're looking, see if they can reform. I don't know if it's reform technically, but basically get down into one of the amateur leagues and hopefully build themselves back up at some point. But money and power and control and shady dealings going on behind the scenes causes, again, for players and fans, a historic club, 1892, I think is. Oh, good. I have the page up here in a second, but they've been around for a very long time, and now players, fans, and everything are going to suffer because of shady dealings by the ownership groups.
Well, and funny is probably the wrong word. Maybe ironic's a better word. But people of my age group are supremely aware of Vitesse as like a big club in the Netherlands, exactly because they were like Chelsea's feeder club for a long time there. Or,
right.
tantamount
That's
to
what
it.
first raised suspicions. All the players that kept going on loan.
Yeah. It is too bad, and I think the City Group is one of the, obviously they're kind of the proto offender in this regard. But I remember reading a few years back about a club in, I guess, like a suburb of Paris or outside of Paris in the town of Troyes or Troyes. I think it's pronounced Troyes. It's Estac Troyes. And the reason this sticks out to me is because I remember reading the article, and the person was like trying to say like, oh, well, we're not sure if the decline of the club could be reasonably linked to the city ownership. Which had taken over 5 years prior to the article I was reading. And I remember they said, but like also fan attendance started to decline 5 years ago. So it's hard to say if it was city's fault or just fans stopped showing up. And it's like, are you really not drawing the dots between those two things? But anyway, that's why that really stuck with me. But the point is that in these multi-club ownership models, and even Newcastle's seeing this a little bit to extent, even though they're not explicitly a multi-club ownership model, I think it is tantamount to that. Where if you're not the top dog in that model, you are just a cog in a machine. And it's tough for the fans to swallow because it's, you want your club to be successful and all this money potentially offers that. But at the same time, it's kind of like at what cost,
Right. And speaking of money and potential, Sheffield Wednesday, don't even know if they're going to be around as a club here. May completely run out of money. They did play their first game of the season. Who knows what is going to happen as things move forward? They have an owner. The owner has not tended well to the club, especially in the last year. I think wants something like 100 million for the sale, somewhere around there. And there was a group that offered 40 million, but he wasn't going to budge. They've been late on wage payments and all kinds of things. The parachute payment coming down from the Premier League, I think, is going to help sustain them a little bit. I don't know if it'll allow them to make it to the January payment, but in the last 24 hours, after divesting himself last month from Crystal Palace, looks like is swooping in John Textor.
Oh, good.
Coming with, at least one other person or someone helping to try to form a group to purchase Sheffield Wednesday. And again, we just talked about, I really feel for the fans and the players here because on the one hand, you got choice of your club maybe dying, depending what this owner chooses to do, because he refuses to go into administration and just take the points loss and kind of demote and restructure. But he refuses to go into administration. They don't have the money. And your other, what looks like viable option, because everybody's looking for a quick sale to make sure it doesn't mess up the league and everything else this season, is John Textor.
Seems like a bit of a no-win situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what. I mean, maybe if you're a Sheffield Wednesday fan, you're happy. This goes back to a fundamental thing for me that I I love the German league. I love the model, the 50, plus one ownership, even though it doesn't, it's not actually in place for all the teams. And, lately people are finding more and more loopholes to kind of get around that. But this idea of, you know, community involvement and not just being consumers or being treated as customers, but being treated as an integral part of the club. I think you only get that with community ownership. Otherwise, you run the risk of something like this. The owner of Sheffield Wednesday, any owner coming in, buying it, and just deciding. We saw it with Sunderland. I mean, it was the whole big thing, Sunderland till I die. And you had an owner come in and just really not care as things were going south, and bad became worse.
Yeah, I don't even. It's my gut tells me the better option is to, try and phoenix the club, but that's easy for me to say from the outside, right? Like, let it go down and
Another club,
again.
historic club that's been around, for a very, very long time. One of the earlier players. Yeah, really, really bad. At least in England, the Premier League announced that they are going to end their partnership with the LGBTQ plus charity Stonewall, which they have the Rainbow Laces program. And it's really a tough read for me because part of what I read there in this BBC article was that Premier League's going to start taking some things kind of in-house rather than working with an outside group, but also seems very fishy along the lines of what we're seeing in this country and in the UK, frankly, of like getting rid of DEI type stuff. Like we're starting, like we're going to say we're going to do it, but we're going to find ways to kind of distance, and we don't want to overtly commit or partner with these groups that I think in this current climate that we're seeing in both of our countries, of people, I would say people in the minority making a big stink about how this is wrong in some way.
Yeah. And I mean, on one hand, I actually do think it being, I don't know, it could be, because I feel like what would always make more noise than these, like the Rainbow Laces campaign, was the players who refused to do it. And it's almost like, is this actually a good thing because we're just removing this platform for the bigots to like make their stance, or is that just letting them win? Like, I don't know. It's hard to say, but it feels backwards. And especially considering the I guess court rulings in the United Kingdom regarding trans people recently, it does feel not benign, I'll say. So it's a little frightening.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out and what plays out really here in both our countries over the next couple of years. But one story, I guess, that I did not have on my, soccer bingo card was Freddy Adu being in the news. I don't know if you saw this. Sporting News had an article, and it wasn't so much about Freddy Adu. The article was about Claudio Reyna and how Freddy Adu says, like, yeah, his story, that was my story. And, I know that Claudio Reyna is trying to get away from Dortmund to go somewhere else. And, Dortmund's, again, people are coming in with offers. Dortmund's not liking the offers. But I don't know, is Claudio Reyna going to be the next Freddy Adu story? Someone who showed tremendous promise as a youth, but then as got into early adulthood, fizzled out for a variety of reasons. The potential clearly is there, but something else is going on to not reach that potential right now.
Yeah, Gio, to be clear, you're talking about, right? Gio
Oh, what
Reyna.
did I say?
You said Claudia,
Did I say
his father.
Claudio?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
This
that's
is
okay.
this is
Uh,
I'm going to go back and fault this to my long COVID brain. I do this all the time. Substitute the
yeah,
wrong things in there. But
you
yes,
were
thank you
you
for
were
that
close.
catch, Gio.
No problem. Just wanted to make sure we were. Because if Claudia
Yeah.
Reyna is still playing, good for
No,
him.
no.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that Freddie Adu would come out and say that. I, it, I would hesitate to make that comparison personally because I think the circumstances are pretty different. As far as I'm aware of Freddie Adu and Gio Reyna's stories. Um, but I mean, I guess ultimately, if the story is one of wasted potential, then sure, I could see the connection there. I don't know if it's a internal thing, like if he just doesn't have the mentality, which is the thing, some people don't, or if he has people in the background who think they're helping him but are in fact not actually being helpful.
Yeah.
Which I suspect it's probably a mix of both, but maybe a little more the latter. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day because the mentality is so much more important than the talent at the top level. Talent alone, he could have a good career in the MLS probably, but if he wants to play at the top level, if he wants to be a difference maker for the U.S. national team, it does seem like there's an attitude problem there, or if not an attitude problem, a baggage problem. Which again, I would hesitate to make the Freddie Adu comparison just because I think the way that Freddie Adu was used by the MLS when he was only like 15 years old
Yes.
it's a little hard to compare anybody to that because that in my opinion is like straight up child abuse, but that's a whole again different podcast we could do. So I would hesitate to make that comparison personally, but yeah, again, from the stance of wasted potential, I definitely see it going down that road because it doesn't seem like he's got the good head on his shoulders.
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, obviously, we'll have to wait a few years to see how this plays out. But
Yeah.
a switch, somewhere else, probably anywhere where he can play, even if it's a step down, is probably the best thing to get him back going because you don't get better by riding the bench.
I think the best thing for him would be exactly like you said, a step down to go to a country like Austria, the Netherlands, Belgium, like not a country nobody thinks about in terms of football, but right next to Germany. His experience being in Germany, it won't be a big cultural change, but it's a good level. He'll get some European football, but he can be the man on the team. Like Saint-Gilloise or maybe not Ajax, but like a PSV or,
Sure.
maybe not Salzburg, but like Austria, Vienna, he'd be the dude there. And they play European football every year. So I think a move like that would really suit him. The question is, can he swallow his pride and do a move like that? Or can they pay Dortmund the money, I guess, is really the more pertinent question.
Right. That seems to be the bigger issue right now.
Yeah.
All right, let's come back to this country and get into some lower league news. The WPSL, the Women's Third Division League, the oldest continuously running women's league right now. They are in the third division, but last April they announced they were planning to start a second division, WPSL Pro. And a lot of fanfare and teams announced, and they were going to start after the World Cup in 2026. But earlier this week, there was an article in Beyond the 90 that WPSL Pro is kicking their start date till 2027. So apparently they have 15 teams. The original plan was to do a little mini kind of tournament season right after the World Cup to capture all the attention and everybody's attention after the World Cup, but then start their first official season, run a spring to fall season in 2027. So I'm not really sure I don't know if this is good news or bad news. So this is one of those things there wasn't much to this article. I've been digging and I haven't found really anything else out there. But on the one hand, it could be good news that they're just like, let's not worry about this little mini tournament. Let's just work towards our league and maybe everything's fine. They just want that little extra time. Or is this a sign that there could be some potential trouble and we might not get a second division. I know the NWSL is looking to do a second division, like a reserve thing, but an independent league outside that doing Division Two, I don't know. Is this hurting WPSL's chances for their Division Two league, or is it a sign maybe of strengthening? What are your thoughts?
I think delays in the lower league soccer space are almost never a strength or a sign of strengthening. Personally, I don't know that I've ever seen that actually play out that way. I'd love to be wrong, but that doesn't strike me as a good thing.
I would say the only place that I've seen delays work out is in the USL. We've seen a couple of times of teams either stepping back, going down a level before they move back up again, or doing something along those lines. But I think that is also a product of the solid structure of the USL right now, that teams have a place within the overall umbrella of USL to either take a step back and be able to step up and still have the support and work forward. So I don't know that you could say that in the WPSL, but I do think I've seen a handful of cases already in the last 5-ish years in the USL of people maybe having a delay or stepping back and really coming on stronger. But I think that's, again, because of the bigger umbrella of USL rather than
And I
the
think also
individual team
too, it's
itself.
different when it's right, like it's an established club stepping down a financial level versus a league getting off a nascent league getting off the ground. I think it's just slightly different propositions, you know.
Right. All right. In USL Championship news, we have some renderings. Detroit City FC, which are like, I don't even know that they've begun demolishing the hospital that's at the side of their new stadium, but they've released renderings. I don't know if you've seen this.
I have,
Released
yes.
renderings of the stadium. I'm going to see if I can get one of these up here in just a second on our screen.
I love that headline there you gave. Detroit City demolishes hospital to build stadium. That's yeah. I'm sure that won't get you any trolls from Detroit City.
Well, that hospital has been, I think,
no, I'm totally joking. I just
yeah. But I believe, and I've seen some pictures of the hospital, but I believe there was some architectural considerations made in the stadium to call back some of the architecture of the hospital. And I, frankly, and I'm going to get one of the, I have another picture that I like just a little better, but or a different angle. I really like this stadium.
Yeah,
I love a smaller stadium that that doesn't have the corner seating. I like the distinct, goal line and touch line stands, and the corners being used for something else. In this case, it looks like they have kind of an entrance plaza, or might be a beer garden. I don't know, but I like those spaces being able to be used for some other things. That's just something that I've always enjoyed with the stadium. I don't necessarily like all the seats wrapped all the way around.
I agree. It gives it a more old school feel as well, having each of the stands being independent.
I really do, but I've been impressed. I mean, we've seen our share of renderings in San Diego.
Well, I was going to say, I do love a good rendering, don't we, here in San Diego?
See if I can get the other one up here. So here's the other one. Like just a slightly different angle there of looking into it. But yeah, this would absolutely get on my bucket list pretty fast of an American soccer specific stadium to see a match. I really hope the ideas that I'm seeing here come to fruition, and I can't believe their timeline to be ready for the 2027 season.
Yeah, they'll be
I think like a lot of I think like a lot of things
like now,
right? I don't see it happening, but maybe it happens during that 2027 season. Sure. Like maybe they're still in Keyworth or something before they move or do some away matches initially. But yeah, I am super excited for that stadium.
Yeah, it's great for them, and they're such a great success story too. So if they can, really secure their future like that, they'll obviously be part of this USL D1 when it eventually gets off the ground. So
Yeah. And then going to USL 1, goal.com has a great article about Athletic Club Boise and their Basque community. And just, I remember one of the lines when I was reading the article was just like all the crests and shirts and gear that people are starting to wear around town already from the club. So that's great to hear. Sounds like they're going to have a great start. New stadium coming in as well. So if just pointing that out, if anybody, we'll put a link in the show notes, but goal.com has a great article. We talked about it last week, how they 5,500 season ticket deposits already. I mean, that's pretty, and that was before, so I don't know what it is now. But yeah, fantastic news for them. And then switching to the UPSL, our last of our amateur leagues that have finished their tournaments here for the summer, and also decides a US Open Cup qualifying berth. But the UPSL had their semifinals and finals just right up the road from us here at Championship Stadium in Irvine. And we had, I think most people would say, a surprise winner in Tennessee Tempo. They are your UPSL national champions. They won 1-0 in the final against a very strong LA10 club that I learned in watching the broadcast of the semifinals. I think that Alessandro De Piero is an owner or part owner of that UPSL team. But I forget who they played in their semifinal match, LA10, and they won like 5-0. They looked to be the lock. I think they only let in 3 goals all season. But Tennessee Tempo scored. And I don't know if you know this. Do you know who scored the goal for?
I don't, but I'm just going to guess Corey Herzog.
No. Good guess. Dominic Oduro.
Oh, wow. That's not
Dominic Oduro playing in the
heard
UPSL scores the winning goal in the final for the Tennessee Tempo. Yeah, great goal from outside the box. Just typical Dominic Oduro shot. He seems to be playing more of a midfield or maybe even attacking midfield kind of position instead of as a striker. But yeah, it was great. It was fun. It was good soccer. We talked about last week Vermont Green. And there's also some good soccer in USL2. The problem was, I guess you could kind of say that LA10, this was more a home game for them, but I don't think the championship stadium is where they play their home matches. But it had a feel of like a bunch of people like us who said, yeah, it'd be cool to go check out these national semifinals and finals for the weekend. And, there was response from the crowd, but it wasn't Vermont Green response. It just, that atmosphere of having your own stadium, your fans who are there being a true home match and really driving the energy, which was a shame because the level of play, considering this is one of our top amateur leagues, wasn't bad. And it didn't have the fan environment to really kind of put it in the same conversation of what we've been talking about with, say, Vermont Green.
Sure. Well, that's one of the, tough parts about the travel and the neutral venues for those amateur clubs is, fans are working on tight budgets too. So that's too bad, but congratulations to them. I'd never heard of that club before. So I assume we'll see them in the Open Cup coming fall time, right?
Yeah, we will. They're newish. I want to say 2018, but that might not be right. But I think they're a newish club. Religion, very big part of that club. I didn't know really anything about them before this past weekend. And when they had coach interviews and stuff at the end, I was like, God is a very important part of this club and this team. So that was kind of what brought this group of people together for this particular team. But they are now automatic qualifier for the 2026 US Open Cup, and we should know the rest of the automatic qualifiers. We know about 4 or 5 of them now, and you can go to the cup.us website and get the full list. We also have some other teams that have already announced that they're going to enter the qualifying tournament, but as soon as we get all the confirmations, like all the paperwork had to be in early August, I think by the 21st, all the final ones will be set for the people who agreed to get in, or if someone passed, whoever it goes next to. And then we should also have announcement of the teams that want to participate in the qualifying tournament, which should start around the end of September. I think is supposed to be the first round of games. So we're getting close to knowing our opening round kind of group of the 2026 Open Cup, and then we have finally the Philadelphia New York Red Bulls match is, gosh, I don't know, is it tonight or tomorrow? It's coming up. I think it's tomorrow. But the one that got weather delayed when it was supposed to happen is finally happening here this week.
Yes, tomorrow at 4:00 Western time. So
yeah, I thought it was tomorrow. I didn't remember seeing it on my schedule, but we're getting closer and closer to our 2026 US Open Cup. All right, let's take it to San Diego. I have three quick stories. One is Anders Dreyer from SDFC. Well, let me back up a second. Carlos Vela in 2018, when LAFC first came on board as an expansion side, Carlos Vela set the record for 27 goal contributions. Anders Dreyer for SDFC is already at 29 with a couple months to go in the season. So unless an injury or something really bad happens, he's likely going to set a record I'm not sure is going to be beaten for a very, very long time.
I had no idea. I mean, I knew he'd been playing well. I didn't realize it was that well. Good for, that's fun. Good for him.
Yeah, and same, like both of us are not really following the team regularly, so every once in a while, it is our local team, try to do a shout out. Local men's top tier team. We do have a lot of local teams here. I'm going to switch gears to the Sirens. What we were going to do is give a plug. They were trying to raise money, $1,500 for their next big Tifo that they're going to do. And it was for the Noche Latina night that they have coming up for the Wave. And the $1,500 was primarily going, for those who don't know, when you do a big Tifo like this, especially in Snapdragon, I know a lot of places require this, but they have to be fireproofed, and that's roughly what the cost is. Like, they're covering the cost for the Tifo and everything else. They just need help covering the cost of fireproofing it. So we're going to give a shout out because I love the Tifos that the Sirens put out. I think they're clean. I think the messaging is great, really connecting with the community almost all the time when they do their Tifos. That's one of the things I love best about what they do over there. So we're going to make a big plug, and I went to double check right before the show to see how close they were to the goal. They've already raised the money. So if you like what the Sirens are doing, they may not need the $1,500 this time, but they're going to need it probably again in the future. So keep that in mind. Maybe for some donations and help support the Sirens and the wonderful Tifos they're creating, especially for the San Diego community.
Yeah, I'm a member. It's because because I like, like you said, I support what they do and I think they do good work. So yeah, always good to support organizations like that.
My last bit of San Diego news really harken back, and it's the whole reason I wore my Locals shirt tonight. Koke Vegas is playing out in Rhode Island. He's been injured for a while, but he's back. And you and I are both familiar with John Morrissey from USL Tactics. And he had just posted something in Blue Sky that I saw. It just says, "Welcome back. Koke Vegas touches at the center circle." which, shows a screenshot of Koke right at the edge of the circle, right near the midfield line, getting ready to play the ball out to one of his defenders. And, we saw that a lot with the San Diego Loyal. I don't think there's any other keeper I see. And again, this is a different coaching staff, but uses him so effectively because he's so good with his feet and allow him to play so far away from the goal. And he almost never gets scored on. You would think that far out, all you need is a little turnover and someone ought to be able to send it into the goal. But I don't remember if we ever saw that at the Loyal. Do you remember if he ever got chipped? A couple times they tried, but I can't remember if he ever got scored on.
I don't think he ever got chipped, but there probably was one or two goals where a bad pass and the goalie being out of position ultimately led to us conceding.
There were some breakaways. I'd say there's easily 3 breakaways that happened that people just easily rounded. It was just a no man's land. And
yeah. But that said, no, I can't think of any times he was chipped off the top of my head.
But he is fun to watch.
Yes,
Definitely.
very much so. Well, yes, absolutely.
It gives you a whole different dynamic to the team. All right, so that wraps up our San Diego news. So let's get into our Pro-Rel series. You and I have talked about this quite a bit and what we might do and how to approach it. And so this first episode, it's going to be part 1 of I don't know how many, but we're going to do a deep dive into the history of promotion relegation and different pyramid systems, ultimately to get back to look at the US and what could work for us, because as we all should know by now, probably anybody who's listening to this podcast, that the USL is looking to institute promotion relegation probably around 2027 with the start of their new first division, if everything goes to plan. So I think in order to have any kind of good conversations about Pro-Rel, because I feel like most people are just shooting from the hip every time I see things on social media, or just, it's just kind of a gut reaction and not really tied into any factual relevance. Thought it would be good. Let's dive into promotion relegation and the history and look at some of those. So they won't be necessarily in consecutive shows, but over time we're going to do a series of these before we, I guess, get into a deeper conversation of what Pro-Rel could or maybe should look like in the USL or the USA as a whole. So Dylan, you ready to dive into this?
Let's do it.
So I think if anybody looks at England right now and football, I mean, England and Wales-ish for some of the teams that are playing over there, but we'll just call it England for just to keep things simple. If you look at, I think a lot of people look at England as I don't want to say perfect model necessarily, but like one of the top models for promotion relegation. You have so many levels and so many tiers. You got your 4 top leagues where right now you get the EPL, you got your 3 leagues for the EFL, the Championship, League 1 and League 2, and then you get into the National League system, which you have your National League, and then beneath that it starts dividing up more like a true pyramid, where you've got the National League, you have 1, then you have 2 leagues below that, then 4 leagues below that, then 8 leagues below that, and you've got promotion and relegation, all the way down, many steps down the pyramid. I think what a lot of people may not realize is here in 2025, when we look at England and look at that system, a lot of structural changes, especially below those top 4 leagues, have happened in the last couple of decades. When I hear people say things online, it's like, well, England has this and they have that. Yeah, a lot of that people are talking about isn't even 2 decades old for some things. And that's what we want to dive into, kind of the history of how England got here, where it is now in 2025. It'll take us a couple of shows to do that. And then start looking around at other countries, other structures, especially for countries that are maybe bigger than England, like the US is. Because if you take England and Wales together in landmass and just take the continental United States, I think it's something like you can fit 47 of them in the continental United States. Just, to help people wrap their brain around the scale and geography that we have in this country compared to what people are dealing with in
I
England.
found an anecdote that has always, to me, really helped to illustrate the size of the United States versus England. To drive from London to the border with Scotland without traffic or just a normal drive is like about 4 hours. And now think about how far can you get in California driving 4 hours? Like not that far. And that's even on like our interstate highway system, which I'm not saying they don't have in England, but my point being is like you can fit several United Kingdoms in California alone.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the 8 hour road trip is like a completely foreign idea to the average British person. Whereas to us Americans, that's like a weekend.
Right. And we can go Southern California to the Bay Area, and we still have, even though it's not as populous, a decent amount, about another third of the state above the Bay Area. It's not like the state ends right above the Bay Area. So, yes, and we don't have the population density either. So, these are things we'll discuss, later on as part of the series. But today, really, what we're going to look at is how did the top 4 divisions get shaped over the last roughly 140 years. So, and then Dylan, feel free to jump in at any time if you have any comments or anything. So we're going to go back to 1888-89. That was the very first year of the Football League. And if you didn't listen to our show from a couple weeks back where we talked about the rise of professionalism and the transfer market, the league didn't start just because people wanted the league. I think it's important to understand why the league started in the first place. The league started because professionalism started before that, and a lot of teams in the middle part of England, these more factory-owned teams who were willing to start paying players to play on their team, realized that was becoming an expense, their wage bill. So one of the ways to solve that, or probably the best way they thought, was let's have a regular season of games, regular fixtures. It'll be easy to plan. And then we know what games we have and we can better plan and budget for that. So the whole reason initially for the Football League was because they were already starting to pay players. And prior to the league, people would just organize one-off matches with local clubs, or maybe you'd enter a tournament. But the league was a way to raise revenue, right? So all the way back in the very, very beginnings, part of soccer and having the league was to raise money for these clubs that wanted to spend more money. So again, things to keep in mind as we move forward, always. So it formed with 12 teams. Now, there were way more than 12 teams in England at this time. Those 12 teams were teams from the Midlands areas and maybe a little bit north in England, but not south, not really around London. And again, if you listen to our other episode, we talked a little bit about this, how there was much more a feeling of maintaining amateur kind of status, especially in the teams around London and the teams that were affiliated with schools and the teams that had a more wealthy kind of clientele and background because they didn't have to work. So sport to them should remain amateur, as opposed to the teams that were being created in and around factories and other groups. And this was kind of a way to be out there on your, I won't really say day off, because usually at that time, Saturdays were like a half day, but allow you to work half day and then go out and play soccer or watch soccer. So there was very different driving forces around the game at this time as well. So you had 12 teams, none of them from the South, none in London yet. But of course, there weren't only 12. There were a lot of teams that were left out of these initial 12. And these initial 12, some teams got together, they voted who got to be in, who didn't. They came up with 12. So the teams that didn't make it in, they weren't special enough, they didn't get the votes. Well, they band together and they form a league that was called the Combination. Now, those 12 teams that went into the football league were generally your better teams in terms of playing. They were better structured and organized. I mean, that would make sense. That's why they want those teams to be together so they could have fixtures. And, you don't want to bring someone in your group who's not going to be able to field a team. And I think as we go through these early years in England, I always, when I go through this, I think of NISA and USL. I think of some of the same problems we see, with leagues and trying to organize and people trying to put something together. So in 88, 89, you get the 12 teams in the football league. You get other teams form the Combination. Football league was very successful. Combination, not so much, because again, it's the group of teams that were left over. They weren't as well organized. They didn't even actually finish their season. Now, one of the things the football league decided to do at the end was if you finish towards the bottom, there was going to be a vote on whether you get to stay in or not. So other teams from outside the football league could apply to come in, but you'd either get voted in or you wouldn't. And we won't go into all the details for each year on how all these things happen, but there was a combination between voting, maybe there'd be some test matches, and some combination of those would ultimately come down to a vote, and that vote would determine whether you stayed in the football league or not. So there were no changes that first season. So they go into the second season with the same teams. The combination reforms almost immediately into what's called the Football Alliance. They're more organized, a little more successful in running their own league this time. So they run parallel to each other. And at the end of that second season, the Football League votes Stoke out and votes Sunderland in to the Football League. And Sunderland was one of the strongest teams in the Football Alliance. So Stoke joins the Football Alliance, and at the end of the 91-92 season, so we're just starting our third season here, the Football League expands to 14 teams, so they don't relegate anybody. Stoke gets back in, and then a team, Darwin FC, who we highlighted in our previous episode, but also, Dylan, do you ever watch the English game on Netflix?
No, I don't have Netflix, so I haven't.
Okay. So that was Darwin FC. So that was all about that time period and the rise of professionalism. So Darwin FC gets in. The Football League has expanded to 14 teams. Then to get ready for the next season, the 92-93 season, the Football League decides to bring the Football Alliance into its fold. So they'll have a first division and a second division. They expand the Football League out to 16 teams. They get 14 teams in what this new second division is, and then play out that season. And again, remember, promotion relegation at this time are these test matches and voting in and out. But in the following season, 93-94, second division goes up to 15. The next year, it goes up to 16. So now we have 16 in both. And then we finally get 10 years after the start of the original Football League, in the 98-99 season, we get automatic promotion relegation. Now, it's interesting. We don't get automatic promotion relegation because they thought that was the best way to do it. We get automatic promotion relegation because the year prior, I guess what's the best example? I don't know if you remember, Dylan, back in World Cups when they had the group stage, before they went to this last games always start at the same time, start at staggered times. So sometimes, the later game already knew the results and teams could, both those teams could play for a tie and it would guarantee both of them would make it in. It wasn't much of a game. So you get this collusion happening between teams. And that's what happened at the previous season, is two teams from the Football League in these test matches, because of the way they were played, knew that a certain result for both of them in this last test match would ensure that they would stay in the top division. So promotion relegation got instituted to get around that collusion. Like if you're in the bottom, you're relegated. You don't get another way of getting back in. And then you're promoted. So we finally get 10 years in the first automatic promotion and relegation. So we'll pause there for a second because we had a lot of changes in the first 10 years. And then we're going to start seeing some huge jumps before, we see some of the other big changes. So I'm going to let you jump in if you have any comments or questions or anything, Dylan, before we kind of get into our next chunk of time here.
Well, I just think it's interesting, though. I didn't know that, prior to reading up on this, that these all kind of arise out of necessity rather than, I guess, deliberate action. It's, I guess it's not surprising. I just didn't know,
Yeah, and that was for the automatic promotion relegation. But this idea of dropping weak teams and bringing in other stronger teams is so foreign, I think, to how we do things in the United States, where once you get that band of owners, like they're in, maybe there's general expansion. Almost never does anybody get out unless they're selling a team or something else. But it always strikes me how, like, these group of stronger clubs, I think, if I'm reading between the lines here, they realized that it helps them get stronger if all the teams are strong. Any weak team in there is like a weak link for the entire league. So, jettison them, bring in someone else who's a little stronger. Yeah, the competition may be harder for me, but it helps all of us and kind of forces you to keep improving, which we know, right, from years of promotion relegation. All right, so let's we're going to kind of make some big leaps now instead of because those first 10 years were very formative, had some growth, everything's starting to come together. The Football League is solidifying itself as the top league in England. But just to be clear, there are lots of other leagues. There's teams all over the place. There's regional leagues. These aren't the only two leagues with teams. These are just now starting to separate themselves from everybody else as the top teams. They're drawing crowds, they're paying players. And now we have promotion relegation. We have a way for other teams to get in that second division. But teams get into the second division the same way they did before, although it's 4 teams. 4 teams are up for a vote. And they, if I remember correctly, they don't get a vote on whether they stay in or not. So the other teams they get to decide whether they stay in or some new teams come in and replace them now in the second division. And that stays. In 1905 to 1906, we're up to 20 teams. Things are fairly stable. And then we get to World War I, right? The league's suspended for, 5-6 years. We don't come back till, I think it's the 1919-1920 season. But once we're back, everything bumps up. So now 22 teams each. War's over. And as we see almost at the end of every war, when we get to that peacetime, we see a bit of a boom. So first and second division go up to 22 teams. England immediately adds a third division, which is the Southern Division, which was a league that was already established, but they named them the third division in English football. But we still don't have automatic promotion relegation between third and second. So we have third division starts in 2021, but it's mostly Southern teams. The next year, we split the third division into a North and a South of 20 teams each. So already immediately after the war, we've grown and created 2 third divisions, a North and a South, but we still have this voting that takes place. So you might win the North or the South, but you still have to vote or do these test matches to get into the second division somehow. And then there were 22 teams in the 21-22 season, and 23-24, they go up to 22 teams. And then we have about a 15-year period where everything just held steady. It was steady and stable. We had our top 2 divisions that have automatic promotion relegation. and nothing, the voting and everything else below with our two regionalized third divisions. 1939 comes around, World War II, the league gets suspended again for a number of years and doesn't resume resumes after the war. And then again, immediately after the war in the 50-51 seasons, the North and South Division III expand both to 24 teams. So again, we get this stability that is pretty locked in, and we're not going to get into when the automatic promotion relegation changes for those two regions, because that's a story also for how the National League system developed, and we'll save that for part 2. But we get, by the end of the 58-59 season, one of the problems is if you win the North or you win the South, both those teams are trying to compete to get into the Division II with the voting. And one of the things that this non-league group, Division III, realized is we need to split these regionalized North and South into a third and a fourth so we can have really a truer winner or two and really try to get them to be promoted, because and work towards that automatic promotion relegation. So that's what happens in the 58-59 season. We actually take those North and South Division III, combine them, top half, it's not exactly top half, but roughly top half of each become the new Division III, and the bottom half of each become the new Division IV. And that really sets up the structure roughly that we see today. And that holds from 59 to 86. We get some stability between those levels. We still have all these other regionalized leagues below that, and trying to figure out how do you get into Division 4 if you want to participate in this league system. In 86 and 87, we do some shuffling all the way through the system to get the top division down to 20 teams. And finally, there's an automatic promotion between D4 and what is now identified and consolidated as the Conference League, which we would now know as the National League. But you get the Conference League developed, and now you get one promotion spot. So there's a way for everybody else below the Football League system to kind of fight it out and then get up to, that one promotion spot. And that is, well, we kind of get back down to 20 teams, takes a couple of years to shuffle all that around. But once we hit the 88-89 season, we're basically where we are right now. We have roughly the same number of teams in each league, just through those top 4 divisions. The rest, other than the Conference League, the rest of stuff below that is a bit of a mess. We have promotion relegation. We have playoffs for promotion spots. Like we basically have the system that we see today. So I'm going to pause there for a second just to go back and touch on a couple of things that happened leading up to this period of stability. Even though it's not part of our conversation for Pro-Rel specifically, in 1974, the FA decided they're no longer going to distinguish between professional and amateur. You're just a club, and you climb the pyramid system. You decide if you want to pay players or not, right? And frankly, you couldn't compete in those 4 levels if you weren't paying players. So they decided to just not distinguish between those anymore. And then also, once we get kind of the 85, 86 era, for those who remember, we have some significant key events that happen in and around England or involving English teams. The 84-85 season was a huge year with lots of hooliganism problems. You had the Bradford City fire right at the end of the season. 2 weeks later, you have the Hazel disaster in Belgium. The next year in 86, you got Hillsborough. So those things also fundamentally affected how things were shaping out through the English football system. But for our purposes today, because those are all other podcasts, we'll just focus on promotion relegation for those first four divisions. So we're going to pause here again. We're in 1988, 100 years after the formation of the Football League, and we have a pretty stable top four divisions, basically what we still see today. So really what we're seeing today has only been around for about 40 years in this effect. So Dylan, I'll toss it to you if you have anything before we wrap it up with the last bit.
Well, and even that, I mean, I know the Premier League didn't bring great structural change in terms of the pyramid, but I mean, you could even shorten that modern history of English football to the 33 years since the formation of the Premier League. So yeah, I even find myself, this is something I spend a lot of time reading about, and I find myself often surprised at how recent some of these things are. You tend to think of them as ancient settled history.
Right.
The one thing I did want to add, just because you mentioned Welsh clubs, and this was a question I had. I remember when learning about these things: is why are there Welsh clubs in the English pyramid? And on the same token, why are there no Scottish clubs? And the answer is actually exactly the same reason. Scotland had an FA at the same time as England, and Wales didn't. So the clubs that existed inside of Wales prior to the Welsh FA played in the English FA, but there were no clubs in Scotland that existed prior to the English FA because the Scottish FA was founded around the same time. So there was never a reason for Scottish clubs, while the older Welsh clubs, your Wrexhams, your Swanseas, your Cardiffs, had a reason to play in the English pyramid. So I always thought that was an interesting fact.
Yeah, and that is, and the Scottish FA was really organized, or like the English FA.
You could argue the Scottish FA had their organization together really even before the English FA, because they solidified much quicker.
Well, and if you look at U.S. soccer history, there probably is a stronger Scottish and Scottish FA influence on American soccer and the evolution of American soccer.
And the chairman of Aston Villa, who helped found the EFL, was a Scotsman.
Right, Scottish.
So the English love to take credit, but I don't know.
The whole passing game idea. Yeah, we talked about this in the other episode, the one that you weren't there for. That there's a lot of people who think part of the reason the passing game developed in Scotland is most of those clubs were people who worked other jobs, and if you were of the style of dribbling and trying to get past someone, it opened you up for a tackle, and a hard tackle that takes you out could prevent you from working. So there are some theories out there that one of the reasons the Scots really pushed and promoted the passing game was because of these working class clubs, and this idea of also why beat the person on the dribble when you can beat them with a pass? It's more effective anyway. So if you can work the ball around rather than brute force try to dribble through or around people, it also saves your legs, right? For people who rely on their work, and you don't want to get fired and you don't want to get replaced, or just be out for a while where you're not getting paid. So
and I think there's actually a lot of truth to that the kind of like class differences led to the differences in the game, because on the other side of that, you have this English ideal of the push and run, right? Where the dribble focus game. And the idea was this very high-minded, like, idea of masculinity and morality. Like, passing was for pussies, basically, is what they were saying, in old England, excuse my French. But like they thought of it as unmasculine and like of the lower class to pass the ball, to share the wealth like that. So there absolutely is kind of class tones to it, which just makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, the whole idea that we hear the English phrase of getting stuck in, right, on a tackle,
exactly.
And that comes from people also, especially dribbling, like get in there and don't let them buy you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into our last bit here. We'll pick it up with 92-93 when the Premier League started. It originally started with 22 teams, so we know it's down to 20. So relatively early on, they had to work through, the system of promotion relegations to rebalance everything. But because the Premier League just took a bunch of teams and set itself above the Football League, so again, different group running and managing the league, where the Football League was managing all the other divisions. So Premier League pulls their teams, they set up the Premier League above it, and effectively what happens is what was Division 2 is now renamed Division 1. What was Division 3 is now Division 2, and what was 4 is now Division 3. So we still have that one team that can get promoted out of the Conference League, which I'm not sure it's still the Conference League at this time. I have to look at my other notes, but we will cover that in part 2. In 2004, 2005, the Football League rebrands to the Championship, League One and League Two. So 20 years ago, right? We just do this rebranding. And really, not even 10 years ago, Football League rebrands as the English Football League, the EFL. Like that naming is just like a decade old. I feel like it's been there forever, even though I've watched soccer from England, especially with my dad being English most of my life. And I know it just feels natural, just like the whole pyramid all the way down. We did our episode on Dorking Wanderers and we talked about what step they started and how much they've come up. But that whole step season, step system that we'll talk about in part 2 is very recent, really in the last 2 to 3 decades has been fleshed out, and a lot of it just in the last couple of decades. So here we are now in 2025, and a couple of points to make. One is clearly after 140 years, like none of this is set in stone. It's constantly changing. Although it kind of changes over generations typically. But we've seen, at least for the top levels of England, how finances, shenanigans, like instituting promotion relegation to keep people from colluding. Right? There's certain things that kind of set this idea of leagues and promotion relegation in place. One of the, and frankly, I think the story of the National League system is even more dramatic for how the base of the pyramid really filtered out to we can sit here in 2025 and someone can basically have a Sunday league pub team and take it all the way to Premier League. Like there is a pathway of promotion relegation that's in place that wasn't in place even 2 decades ago. So getting that stuff in place where we talk about, you hear people say that is really a relatively new thing. I mean, technically someone could do it before, but at some point you'd have to get voted in or something else would happen. You couldn't be there just purely on merit for how you did in your league. And then the last thing, which I really want to find out more about this, but I stumbled across, maybe you know more about this, Dylan. In 2020, there was something called Project Big Picture. And it was an attempt to reunite the English Premier League back into the English Football League, and apparently pushed by Manchester United and Liverpool, and I don't know who else. I don't know what the reasons were. I don't know anything else. I just stumbled across this. I was like, oh, maybe we'll have to dig into that another time. I don't even remember hearing about that. I mean, that's when we were in the pandemic. Maybe that was part of it. There was like a push, but of course, right around that same time, we had the Super League talk as well. So
True.
I don't know what the 2020. This has to be before the Super League talk. So yeah, I don't know much. I don't know if you know anything about that or not.
No, I mean I've heard it referenced, and I know that the English Football League has a ongoing and ever evolving relationship with the Premier League that involves some sort of financial compensation. I mean, I think you referred to it earlier when talking about Wednesday's parachute payments. That's not what we think of as parachute payments because they were relegated from the Premier League. They haven't been in it recently enough, but parachute payments in the sense of the money that the Premier League sends down the football pyramid to help support the Football League. Yeah, so I was aware. I know that the Premier League has been kind of chipping away at um,
They've been
that
trying, yeah.
system. Yeah, and it's shady too because they all do this, but they try to frame it in ways that make it sound like they're doing a favor for the football league too. Which
Right.
they're not, but that's another topic for another day. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm aware of it, but the nitty gritty details are not really something I'm attuned to.
Yeah, and as we said, we're going to do this so we can look at a variety of systems because not every country evolved the same way, and not everybody does it the same way. I mean, we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about the Netherlands, two professional, 3 amateur below that, promotion relegation through those top 5, but you need to meet certain requirements to be able to actually get promoted into that second division. That's not terribly different, even though we don't do it on merit at the moment, but not terribly different than what we have in the US. Like you have to make sure you meet certain requirements. And frankly, the English football league system, like it has that as well. You have to meet requirements to go up to the next level. There's stadium and grounds requirements, there's locker room requirements, there's all these things you have to do if you actually want to get promoted. But everybody who's at least, I shouldn't say everybody, but almost every time anybody is close to being able to be promoted, it's because they want and are trying to be promoted, not because they just happen to have a streak of luck and like, oh, great, we won the league, but we're just going to stay here. So there are requirements. And I think some of the things we have in the US, some things, depending how you look at them, are very natural to have. But if you look at it in a different light without the true kind of open system, they get used a little differently. All right. I guess that's all I have for this time. We'll pick up the story again when we do our second part, which might be next week or might be sometime after that. Before we go, a quick call to action. The cup.us, I think, is the best independent news source for the US Open Cup. I think they do a great job every year. They did a wonderful kind of throwback to the 1995 World Cup this last time. They always are putting out articles about the history of the World Cup and giving some great context about teams that are going to be playing in future rounds. But they have a Patreon where you can help support them if you'd like, because again, they are an independent group. They are patreon.com/US Open Cup. So please, if you get the chance and you can do so, help support them, because that's where I know the two of us get a lot of our Open Cup coverage and a lot of other people, and helps them pay to get actual reporters on the ground at these games. So we're not relying on the teams necessarily to share information. There's actually someone there. All right, Dylan, that kind of wraps us up. Do you have any plans for the week?
Well, yeah, Tottenham playing the Super Cup
right.
tomorrow, so I'll be watching that. But other than that, just keeping up with the early rounds of European qualifying, like we've been talking about. There's been some really interesting and entertaining results so far. So,
yeah, agreed. I'll probably be doing the same this week, seeing what I can try to catch live and at least following the scores. And with my newfound interest in Bradford City, they got a couple games
well, I was
before
going to
our
say,
next podcast.
Congratulations. They beat Championship Blackburn today in the first round of the EFL Cup, second round, first round?
Yeah, they had 2 goals in the first 4 minutes and then held on for a 2-0 win. So that was good. So I'll do that and probably catch some USL as well over the weekend.
Nice.
All right. I think that now officially wraps up our episode here on the LGS Pod. If you have a question or comments about tonight's show, please drop us a note. You can drop us a comment on our YouTube channel. You can send us a message on Blue Sky at soccershorts@bigpinedigital.com. Or if you're listening in any of the various podcast apps, send us a text using the Send Us a Text link at the top of the episode description. We definitely appreciate your comments and your feedback. And better yet, if you are available. And available Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock. You can join us live on our YouTube broadcast. And actually, we had a couple of comments. I'm going to have to go ahead and double check and see if we have these. So I'm going to toss it to you, Dylan, for any final comments before I see if we have any last things to share from our chat from tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you did come back to me because I did want to actually talk about this. One of my favorite results thus far in the early rounds of the Champions League qualifying. So they wrapped up most of the third round games today of 4 before you get to the league phase. And Kairat Almaty have beaten Slovan Bratislava in the third round. I believe they are now guaranteed to be the first ever Kazakh team to make it to at least the Europa League or group phase. They have Celtic in the fourth and final qualifying round of the Champions League. So I don't see them getting through that. I mean, they squeaked by Bratislava on penalties. And, no disrespect to Slovan Bratislava, the Slovak champions, but I'm willing to bet a lot of the people listening to this podcast have never even heard of Bratislava. So I don't see them getting through, but they should be in the Europa League group phase, league phase, whatever. Which I think they will be the first ever Kazakh team to do that. But the real reason I'm interested in them, and this was pointed out by the Sweeper podcast, which we've talked about, so bump to them. They are by far the most Eastern team to have ever competed in European knockout football. And when they make the league phase, will be by far the easternmost team to be in a league phase. Almaty is further east than China's westernmost point. It's further east than all of the Stan countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. It's further east than all of those, right at the base of the Tianjin Mountains at the western part of China. It's kind of stunning how far east it is. It's in no way, shape, or form European. Geographically, probably really even culturally, ethnically, anything like that. But because of funny geopolitical happenings at the fall of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan is a European football nation. And so Celtic will be making the trip from Glasgow to one of the few places in European football that is colder than Glasgow, Almaty, Kazakhstan. So I love we talked about Santa Clara last week, right? I just love the geographical kind of wildness like that.
Yeah, that's the fun part, seeing some of these teams that you don't hear about week in, week out on all the shows. And I think those stories are great. All right. Well, thank you for the final comments, Dylan. That wraps up everything for us. I do want to give a huge shout out to Puma, who has joined us in the chat tonight. And we'll see if we can get a few other people in the chat and drop some comments, especially when we do our next one here on promotion relegation with the National League system. All right, Dylan, thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you, everybody who joined us live. And we'll see everyone again next week.